All right, we're going to get started. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for coming. My name is Frank Pinto, and I'm the Vice President of Engineering at Lembuzz. I am not really that good at shouting, so I'm going to ask if any of you in the back really want to hear me, please come down a little bit closer, because my voice will disappear as this thing goes on. Great. I'm going to pull some stuff up while you guys do that, and then we can get started.
Guys, come closer.
System. Excuse me. Okay, great. Great. All right, great. All right, again, thanks for coming. First, I will sort of see where you guys are at. How many people are aware of the differences between startup world, small companies, rapid growth companies, and corporations? Who has any sort of familiarity with that? Just raise your hand. All right, more or less. How many people are aware of the way venture funding life cycle works? How do you grow your business? You got one? All right, cool. So we're going to do a little bit of talking about that. Okay. And in terms of industry interests here, how many people are interested in, I'm guessing at the intersection of technology always, because I'm talking about technology, but finance as an industry? Okay, more or less. Healthcare technology. Okay, a little bit more. Education tech. Okay, advertising tech. All right, great. So we got a good distribution. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Lembuzz.com, the life cycle of our company, the different sort of business models that exist in early stage companies, the difference between a startup company and a corporation in a couple different things, in the sort of the level of bureaucracy and processes that exist in one versus the other, as well as what opportunity there is for somebody that is a software developer or in more of a technical role in each of these companies. Hopefully at the end of this, you all will understand sort of a little bit more about what you want to do with your career after you graduate, because you can do a billion different things, basically. I'm going to do a little writing. All right, so the first thing that you need to know is that all these companies that have grown rapidly have not done so with their own money. There is a large difference between a startup company and a bootstrapped company, or alternatively known as an upstart company. Something that is like a hardware store that will buy up materials and then sell those materials is a bootstrap company, is an upstart company. That it's like a restaurant, it's like a spa, it's like any business that buys inventory and sells that inventory for a margin or sells services that they produce in-house, basically. The thing with upstart businesses, with bootstrap businesses, is that there is no possibility for rapid growth, because rapid growth comes from large marketing investments. It comes from a lot of new clients, and in a variety of different businesses. Let's say you're a hardware store. A lot of new clients means selling a lot of new inventory. And a lot of new inventory means that you need a lot of money to buy this inventory in order to sell it, right, at margin, whatever. LendBuzz and other startups, as the term specifically points to them, are different. We take on venture funding. We take on investment, and as a result of taking on that investment, we give a portion of our company, right? So I'll pull up the sort of startup life cycle, and we can talk about this a little bit. Let's take something like something everyone is familiar with, a ad tech startup like Facebook or Twitter, right? What do they invest in early on? Idea stage, seed stage. They are investing money in one primary thing, which is product development. They are trying to create a platform, a product that people go to, interact with, engage with, and as a result, they then in the future have eyeballs to sell to advertisers. This is the idea stage, the seed stage, and you see a negative kind of expenditure graph here, because these people have no money to create this product, right? All this research and development, which is at the end of the day what this is all somebody else's money. Thank you. Ooh, laser pointer. Yeah. All right, great. So what that is Facebook went to some seed stage investors, and they are known as different investors based on the amount of money they're willing to give you and how much they expect to receive. That's not really what I wanted. Full year, blah, 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 VC rounds, there you go. So this is, historically speaking, how much money people on average raise in each round. What you have to understand about building a business is there's no one way to do it. People do it a billion different ways. But patterns do emerge. Initially, you try and take on very little money, Series A, even before Series A seed. We're talking about $100,000 in your seed round, because you don't want to give up a lot of your company. The way you determine how much your company is given up is by the valuation of your company. So say I want to sell you this asset, right, this marker. This has a cost. This is a comparable cost that you can figure out in other supermarkets or in other stores or whatever. A company does not have that. A company, it's all about modeling methods of valuation and perception, right? So if you have something like Facebook, where they don't have a product, they don't have users, they don't have anything at the very beginning, right? How do you value that? How do you value that? So that's why people in seed stage usually don't take a lot of money. And the reason that these numbers grow as the company grows, right? Because as you've proved something, you have product, you have engagement, you have eyeballs, you have interaction, you have whatever it is that you have, the valuation of your company goes up. Because you now have a way to prove that there's a way to make money off of this. And if the cost of this marker is greater, right? If all of a sudden this marker now costs $100, selling you the cap, right, will be comparatively a lot less percentage of the company than it was when this marker was $1. If you give me $100,000 when this is worth $1, I am in debt to you. If you give me $100,000 when this is worth $1 million, well then you don't get my whole company. And that's pretty much how that works. So what's usually sort of spoken about in this life cycle is the seed stage and the Series A stage, sort of here before, even here before, is to achieve product market fit. In an ad tech company, it is to get a product that people are engaging with. In a finance company, we can talk a little bit about LendBuzz. What we do at LendBuzz is we give car loans to internationals. It's a pretty simple business. We give money, we expect to get more back. If we're giving money to the wrong people, we don't get that money back. We fail as a business. If we're giving to the right people, we get that money back and we succeed. So traction for us is really, is the market there? Our hypothesis was that internationals that came to the US have terrible financing options for cars, for automobiles, for motorcycles, for whatever. And they need better interest rates, right? Our seed stage was proving, sort of right here, it was proving that people were willing to borrow money from us at good rates, proving that one, and proving two, that our default rate, the amount of people that didn't pay us back, was next to none. That basically means on a conceptual level that there is a lot of people that are willing to pay back their loans, that are willing to take money from us, where we can make money. So that's product market fit. That's what that's known as. If you read any book, let's say The Lean Startup by Steve Blank, or if you read Zero to One, pretty sure it's by Peter Thiel, they all talk about how your biggest goal at the beginning, just get there. Just get to product market fit. Because once you have product market fit, you can play around, right? Once you have something that you can prove to people that people want this, you can play around with a variety of things, right? Oh, let's mess around with digital marketing experiments. Oh, let's expand the product out this way. Maybe that will grab us more people, more profit, more eyeballs, more something, right? That's what that first stage is for. The next stages are for Series A. Let's say you've determined that there is a product market fit, that there is something that can be sold, that there is something that you can make money off of, right? Series A is, okay, now that we've figured that out, let's build out a team and let's clean up ourselves a little bit. Because in the early stages, I brought some people from LendBuzz here today, it's a mess, right? The systems that you're creating, the way you're doing things, the cohesiveness of the UI, let's call it, right? Oh, does this look and feel the same way on this part of the site as on this other part of the site? The vast majority of the times, that is a no. That is a huge no. So in Series A, you're really building out the team. You're making your product better. You're sort of improving. You're trying to grow up. You know, you were in the kid stage. You're trying to be in the teenager stage. That's basically it. Series B, a lot of it is, all right, we have a team, right? We have a management team, we have a product. How do we hit mass market? There's a great book called Crossing the Chasm, or Crossing the Chasm, don't know how you pronounce that talks about you have your early adopters. They have validated that you have a business, they have validated that you have product. How then do you jump to mainstream, right? How did Facebook go from college level Facebook, where people just are connected to their friends, to mass market, I have Facebook, they have Facebook, everybody has Facebook, right? That is Series B right there. And then Series D, C, D, and beyond are really just different stages of growth for different kinds of companies. So one thing in health tech, for example, I know some people mentioned they were interested in that. Health tech is largely, health startups are largely, maybe 20 years back, were largely pharmaceuticals, right? We have this PhD in some very specific sort of branch of medicine, branch of pharmacology, branch of whatever, and we know that we can produce this drug that we think, right, the hypothesis always, will have this effect on these patients, on these clients. It's really expensive to do that. It's really expensive. It'll take up considerably more capital to do that and do 3 clinical trials and then sell that to people than it will for Facebook to create a platform for people to engage in, right? So different kinds of businesses have different funding needs. When you are a health tech startup, you reach Series C, Series D very quickly. Because Series A and Series B end up being, all right, we've proven our product. We went through all our clinical trials on Series A, right? That's how much money that took, all of the Series A money. Now, we actually want to market this drug. We're positive that we can sell this drug. Now we want to market it. Series B, Series C, Series D, and so on. And for those of you that, I guess, have come here from a more business background, I know there's sort of the graduate school here is a little bit varied in that there's people that are very hardcore computer science and people more at the intersection of business and tech might be interested in going to venture capital after your master's, might be interested in sort of something more on the finance funding route. There's different kinds of VCs that focus on these things, right? So your seed stage VC will rarely ever do Series C stage deals. A Series C stage deal can be up to like, these are average rounds. A Series C stage deal could be up to $100 million, right? you don't deploy $100,000 in the same way that you deploy $100 million. There's very different sort of ways of doing that. And yeah, that's basically, that's Startups 101. That's Startups VCs 101. That is your first piece of knowledge for today. Let's talk a little bit about where we are as Lembuzz as a company. So Lembuzz started in, yeah. It's content marketing. Yeah, let's go with that. Lembuzz started in late, maybe Q3 of 2015, September, October, around there. First 6 months was seed stage, Series A, right? It was product market fit. Our CTO, one of our founders, was a postdoc of machine learning at MIT, right? Their hypothesis, him with our co-founder, was that we can determine people's risk through something more than just underwriting debt-to-income ratios, underwriting credit scores, right, or analyzing credit scores. We can look at where you've studied. We can look at what you chose to study, where you've worked, sort of in what kind of role. What does your bank account look like, right? Are you somebody that gets paid and then immediately spends that all, or are you somebody that has more of a step function of savings, right? You get paid, you save most of it, you spend a little bit of it, get paid, and so on, right? That says something about you. It says something about your spending habits, it says something about your trustworthiness. That was the hypothesis. More than that, the hypothesis was really that specifically advanced graduate degrees really needed this product. PhDs, postdocs, people with 2 masters or whatever. One of the things you reach, or one of the things you hit when you're going from seed, Series A, to Series B, when you're sort of finalizing your product market fit, is that your hypothesis is almost always wrong, but it's a variation on that, right? So Lembuzz.com, right now our targets aren't so much people that have done doctorates and need cars. It's in fact more so a lot of people that come with a lot of family support from as undergrads to the US, right? And they need a car to get around because they live in Boston, and you know, Boston, you kind of need a car. They live in Houston, you need a car to get around from university to apartment or whatever. That's a huge client base for us. What is also a huge client base for us is people that work as Uber drivers, people that work as sort of busboys or as wait staff. And they've come over from their country to pursue economic opportunities, and they're here in a variety of legal ways, right? And they have that. They have that bank account that says, I am making this much money because you see it being deposited in my account every single week or every single 2 weeks, and I am spending this much, right? We can verify that. We can verify that, and we can run algorithms on top of that, and we can say exactly what rate this person deserves based on their cohort, how frequently they default, basically. So that's really Lembuzz, better data analysis, right? We don't look at your credit score. I mean, we look at your credit score in case you don't pay your bills, but we don't look at it if it's empty, right? We look at all the other data, school, work history, bank transactions, all that stuff. The hypothesis changed from the beginning, postdocs, doctorates, whatever, to now, really a variety. We have 9 groups that we underwrite right now, all in different segments of the population. Some are undergrads, some are professionals, some are sort of blue-collar immigrants, some are, you know, it's really a variety of things. The hypothesis evolved. We went through seed funding in, what was it, 2016, rose our Series A in 2017, so hit product market fit, sort of starting to build out the team, and now really focusing on growth. And I'll tell you a little bit about sort of our strategy for that. Lembuzz.com originally, direct-to-consumer loans, so you check your rate, put whatever car you want, right? Yeah, you could do anything. Right? Used, put a VIN number, whatever. Only need 10K. The way this worked previously is that somebody, like myself, would go on Lembuzz.com, I need a car, I fill out that information, I fill out my whole application, and I tell Lembuzz who to wire the funds to. In 2017, a third of our traffic was from referrals. from existing clients. A quarter of our traffic was from Google search engine. Another third of our traffic was from dealerships. So we had, let's talk about Series A to Series B, right? Product market fit stage to growth stage. We had this idea that our growth was really going to come from these dealerships. They are a directly accessible marketing channel. It is a place that we can go to, we can sell to, and we can get clients from these dealerships by just expanding to dealerships. So the next product that we offered was not direct-to-consumer loans. It was loans through dealerships. So now we have 50% of our traffic is through dealerships. We have strong relationships with dealerships in Massachusetts, in California, in Texas, in Florida, and really all over the place. And we give loans through them. So that is a little bit about LendBuzz. Next, I'd like to move on to some tech stuff. But first, any questions about sort of the business stuff? Yeah.
Don't you guys have like a hard check? I read that you guys don't have a hard check when you're giving out loans, like, except, you know, like maybe an SSN, or even if it's okay if they don't have an SSN?
Yes, it's fine if you don't have an SSN. We tend to look up profiles through both Social Security and addresses. So if really the US credit bureaus have anything on you based on where you've lived and stuff, we will look at that stuff. And we do a hard credit pull because it's a requirement of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that if you are going to be lending to people and looking at their credit score, that needs to sort of cause a hard pull in the credit bureaus. Yeah. It's really different. It's really varied. Like I said, there are 9 underwriting groups. Somebody, for example, somebody whose income is just barely enough to cover their debts, based on their bank account, right? Not their stated debt to income, but based on their bank account. That person's consistency of income will weigh a lot more than somebody who has excessive income, obviously, right? After a certain income threshold, whether that is self-generated, whether that is family support, because we do take that into account, it stops mattering. So it's really, it really depends sort of what your whole profile looks like. Yeah. Yeah.
What was your initial marketing strategy and how you acquired your initial set of customers?
Sure. So initially, it was largely network effects. Which basically means both our founders were international. They had they did a postdoc at MIT, business school at MIT. They had a large international network sort of around their personal networks, and they started just marketing through that, basically. Like people posting on Facebook, posting on they're both Israeli, the Israeli-American group, right? Or pretty soon after that, they onboarded a contractor who is now our head of sales, who is a Turkish person. So he would post on all the Turkish on Turkish groups, and it slowly went that way, sort of marketing through network effects, knowing that people that have just arrived to the country tend to rely a little bit more on the opinion and on the word of people that they know, right? People that they know that were here from before. So that was initially it. We can talk a bit about digital marketing because that's a super interesting topic, especially when it comes to LendBuzz. From network effects, right? It grew to dealership transactions, obviously, and now we're taking on more of a digital marketing strategy where we now have identified the profiles of the people that use our service, the profiles of the people that need the money. If we know that, and Facebook allows us to pinpoint sort of how to get to them, Google Ads allows us to pinpoint how to get to them, well then you can start talking about the unit economics of a marketing campaign. If that's something that people would like to hear about, we can talk about that also.
Are these vehicles taken from LendBuzz through the loan? Are they eligible for the insurance?
Say that again?
The vehicles taken up from the LendBuzz, are they eligible for the insurance?
Are vehicles bought through LendBuzz eligible for insurance? Yes. In fact, all vehicles in Massachusetts, at least I'm pretty sure in all the US, they need at least liability insurance to drive them on the road. So you absolutely need insurance. Now, do we offer insurance as LendBuzz? Currently, no. There is a variety of products that is on our roadmap but right now it is just auto financing.
How do you get the profile of a individual, for data analysis? How do you get the profile if you don't have an assistant for that?
The full profile. So you have to sort of ask, what is a person's full profile, right? Like, who are you? Who am I? Like, what is part of me? Credit bureaus don't really grab that much about you. They know what credit cards you have, what utility bills you have, and they know whether you've paid those things. Sometimes rent goes into there, doesn't frequently. And that's pretty much it. That's really all credit bureaus know about you. After that, it's your stated information, right? After that, it's I say I make $100,000 a year. If after the pre-approval stage, they'll often ask you to verify that. Oh, you said you made $100,000 a year. I want to see a pay stub, right? Or I want to see some kind of proof of income. You say you live in the US, you say you have this visa. I need to see a proof of residence. I need to see a sort of a visa document or whatever. Yeah. Good.
And these profiles that you built, you know, how sophisticated indeed they are as being able to predict the likelihood.
Yeah, it's a good question. So let's see. It's a good way to.
I'm looking at them like, okay, if you can do this kind of thing, I can use these to measure even, to predict even the likelihood of success or being promoted.
Correct.
I mean, how is that any different, right? Or is
Sure.
this really just money-based?
Yeah, it isn't really different. There's two systems that we use. One is statistical algorithms to extrapolate from data. That's historically, a lot of people use that. That is nothing new. It's saying something like, well, Harvard is a better school, or Northeastern is a better school than Bunker Hill, right? Sort of on the rankings of US News and World Report, based on the average income of graduates, based on a variety of things, saying that. It's saying a aerospace engineer tends to make more money than an English major, right? And it's taking ranking tables like that, predicting expected potential income, for example, and based on expected potential income, you achieve sort of a ranking of rates as to what that person is capable of doing. That's the not interesting part, you know, that's the old part. The interesting part is when you apply machine learning on top of that. So say you bootstrap, and this, if anybody's familiar with Square Capital, or Square, you know, the credit card processing thing that is in a lot of merchants, this is the exact same way they do business. They had a credit card processor for a variety of businesses where they then saw sort of that business's transaction data. These people do this many transactions per month, whatever. We know how much income is coming into them. They then have all these data points about existing clients that they can do things with, right? So originally, from their credit card processor, they jumped to Square Capital. They gave small business loans to their clients based off of traditional underwriting like what we just talked about, statistics, right? Statistical tables. That's only to bootstrap it till you get to a certain point. After you get to a certain point, you realize that, well, your statistics are wrong, right? They're always wrong. And you need to have better results. So how do you do that? The de facto way to do that now is machine learning. And what machine learning does is takes all the stuff we just talked about, what school you went to, what major you went to, what major you had, what sort of jobs you've had throughout your career, and turns you into a vector of information. Anybody, linear algebra, anyone remember that? Not so much. So just FYI, the school stuff does matter because, right, it ties into these things. And the only way to really understand where it's going to tie in is if you actually pay attention in your classes. So, so do that. It turns you into a vector of information, right? And once you have a vector of information, let's say with 100 data points, well, now you are a point in a 100 vector space, right? You can think three-dimensionally, and then maybe 4 dimensions time. It's harder to imagine a 100 vector space, but it exists, right? And wherever you have an absolute mapping of data to a 100 vector space, you can also calculate distance between those points, right? So then the interesting thing becomes, No more statistics, right? We want better data. We want better results. How do we do that? How do we, as you say, predict who's going to be successful? Predict who's going to be, who's getting a promotion? You've mapped everybody that's ever gotten promotions, everybody that's ever been successful on a vector space of however many data points you want to use. And then you see this person that we're evaluating, who are they closest to? What are they most like, right? Somebody that is wait staff will earn within a reasonable range. They will be close in the vector space to somebody else that is also a person that works sort of in the restaurant business or whatever. That's the kind of stuff that is the future. That's the kind of stuff that we're doing at LendBuzz via machine learning. That's the kind of stuff that Square Capital does. It's really sort of the state of the art right now in terms of how that works. That said, it's all math. You know, it's all math. This is all computers. I think it's really important sometimes once you dive into this stuff to take a step back and understand that all the stuff that we're doing it for people, right? So you have to evaluate every so often, are the results that these machines are giving us, are they actually reasonable, right? Do they actually make sense? In mathematical terms, did we overfit the data so much that the results that we're producing is not producing successful people, right? Are there more qualitative things that go into what it is to be successful than just these data points that we can put in a vector space? Right. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna continue. I think I'll probably do it's 5:44. I'll probably talk for maybe 10, 15 more minutes, and then we can open it up to sort of questions and networking and whatever it is that you guys want to do. So for those interested specifically in LendBuzz as a career path, as a place to develop software, we're going to talk a little bit about our tech stack and about how to make your first job out of school, your first technical experience, a fruitful one, how to be successful, how to not piss off your bosses, basically. Okay. Is there any way I can sort of pull this up?
I assume you're going to get to the data, how you handle your data, your platform as well, or no?
The machine learning stuff, probably not. Yeah.
But what's the, at least in terms of numbers, how much data are you dealing with here?
Oh,
Probably
okay.
Collecting stuff from different hundreds of channels.
Self-reported data mostly. Self-reported, and then validation through documents. And we have APIs that connect with the legitimacy of companies, rankings for companies. And that's largely it.
Loans data feeds back into you.
Yes, that is the machine learning layer. Yes, it feeds back into it. There's that. There's also, we tap into a couple different APIs to get sort of valuations for our collateral. How much is a car actually worth, right? Because based on how much it's worth, we can give a loan. If a car is worth $10,000, we can't give a loan for $100,000. So we tap into things like that. Yeah. If it's an issue, I could just sort of right there.
Put this up.
Let's see. And then we'll have, say, all right, so we have a couple different technologies at LendBuzz. In terms of the general way you're supposed to be thinking about your education, about what you're learning, about how to learn things. I am a huge fan of just saying, learn as much as you can about everything. The only thing that should stop you from learning something is if there's something better to learn. So for example, don't say something like, oh, I'm a back-end programmer, you know, I really shouldn't be touching CSS, I can't be bothered. You know, like that's not my role, that's not what I'm about, or whatever. I'm learning Java, or I'm learning the Swing framework, or I'm learning a variety of things. That is a huge handicap, especially in something like lembuzz.com. We can talk a little bit about the differences between corporate and a small team like Lembuzz. At Lembuzz, we're maybe 17 people right now. We'll probably grow to something like 25, 30 by end of year. And in our team, you have to do a little bit of everything. We have sort of a strong separation between our Python side of the house and our Ruby on Rails side of the house because the systems are so massive. But both sides of the house are assumed, and I test for it in my interview, are assumed to have more than just a passing knowledge of our database, of PostgreSQL, of in general how you use SQL databases, of being able to structure an application correctly, of data sort of code architecture, data architecture, of actual coding capabilities, right? If I ask you to reverse an array or reverse a list or whatever, one of the simplest algorithmic problems that you can solve, you should be able to do that in 10 seconds flat, right? That's not like a difficult problem. That Unix utilities, so if the whole industry uses Linux servers, with the exception of sort of .NET heavy companies, which exist. I'm not saying that like if you are really sold on working at a specific company and they know and they work exclusively in .NET and they put everything on Windows servers, I'm not saying to ignore that stuff. But I am saying that the vast majority of companies where new employment exists right now is all in open source technologies and it's all backed on Linux servers. If knowing that, you don't sort of invest in more than just a passing knowledge of Linux servers, you're going to have a hard time. And pretty much everything I've just mentioned right now at a place like lembuzz.com, when you come to interview, we test you on breadth and depth in very certain things, very specific things that we need at the moment. If you don't have the breadth, you don't even make it past the first round. And that's that. Now, corporations are a little bit different. On corporates, you're placed on a team. Right? You're assigned to a team, you're working on a project, you own a product, let's say Facebook Newsfeed, let's say sort of Google Search, that is still a product, if you can believe it, it is still being actively developed. And those products have projects within them, and those projects within them move. So you can spend a vast majority of the beginning of your career, 3 years, 4 years, working in Go, sort of on the same product and never run out of things to do and become a specialist in that sort of stuff. That said, the kind of corporations that you want to work with where you're very focused on a specific product like that don't hire just for that specific product or a specific project. They expect you to be able to move between teams, they expect you to move between products. So all that's a very long way of saying don't limit yourself from learning, right? Your master's, once you're out sort of in the real world, doesn't mean too much. And it's not a knock on education. That is to emphasize that the knowledge matters more than the piece of paper, right? If you went through the classes to sort of say that you got a master's from Northeastern University, a very good school, and then you show up at the technical interview and you have a hard time reversing a list, it won't matter. It can't save you, basically. It can only help you, but it can't save you. All right, so in terms of our systems, we use PostgreSQL database for a database. It is a SQL database that is most similar to Oracle, and it is the database to use. If you're not going to use something NoSQL, MongoDB, Couchbase, anything like that, PostgreSQL, that's what you use. Python, Flask, this is our whole data layer. So this is where all our underwriting happens, all statistics, all the machine learning, and our core data access. That is the only thing that reads and writes to the database. Sort of one layer. And we could talk about security a little bit, even though I think I ran out of time. Everything else, everything user-facing is what I'm in charge of. Lembuzz.com, for example. Or we also have an admin that has what? Has a little search thing, and then a table. We also have an admin that interfaces with this as well. The user-facing things, lembuzz.com is our clients, the people that apply to get a loan, and the admin is our internal team. Our internal team are our own clients. As a tech team, we don't just service the outside of the company, right? We service the people that are trying to do work inside our own company. That's not to say it's IT, right? It is not a maintenance role on servers or routers or what have you. It is acknowledging that your user isn't just lembuzz.com's user as a producer, as a developer. Your user is whoever will consume what you've produced, right? If you're creating an open source repo on github.com, you want to be nice to your users, you want to document your code, right? You want to have a README, you want to have all these things. They're important for working well together. And this is sort of where I want to take the conversation about how to be successful in your first role. Aside from knowing the stuff that you know deeply, right? Having enough breadth and caring enough about one piece of that to evolve a depth in that thing, a T-shaped individual, right? You also just have to know how to not piss people off on your team. Because development is a very collaborative sort of type of work. Example. This is our Python data layer, API, everything. Let's say I want to do something. Let's say I want to create a new loan application. Where does that happen? That happens on lembuzz.com. Right? Somebody fills out the form and they press create loan application. There, I create, for all the object-oriented people, I create an instance of a loan application that is populated with all the data that is necessary. That instance then gets serialized and sent over the network to our API. Our API then retrieves that information, parses it out to all the relational database tables, creates that, and sends me back a response on lembuzz.com about whether that was successful or not. Right? A method or an API that is just one, let's say, endpoint that does everything. It creates a loan application, but it also grabs a payment from a client, right? And it also connects somebody's bank account. And you have to pass it a bunch of flags, is a really difficult API to use. And it doesn't matter when you're doing the coding, because you wrote the API, you know how to build this layer, you know how to build that layer, right? You're on both sides of it. You're connecting the pieces. It matters a lot when you're working with other people. So if you create that and you're like, oh, no, it works like this, and then you sit down with somebody to sort of stitch things together, is not a good API, right? If you can't produce something, type out in a little text file, documentation, send an email, and have the person on the other side of that understand completely how to use your code, if you can't put something on github.com and have whoever is reading about your repo, the README, understand how to use your code, you have failed as a developer. And that's, I think, the most important mentality you need to keep in mind going into your first job. It's you are there to make other people's lives easier, right? Your goal as a team is to produce something that people can use, that people delight in using.
How's the team split here?
Sure. So right here, data layer, we have two people. That's our CTO, and Pranjal's up there. Say hi, Pranjal. And they're focused on these, and then myself and one other person are focused on user-facing things. So that'll be, yeah, that's pretty much it. This is Ruby on Rails. And the other thing I should mention is every tool has its purpose, right? So we use Ruby on Rails for all user-facing things because it was very fast to prototype different aspects of the application. We use Python for our data layer because everything to do with machine learning is already written in Python, right? All those libraries, all those modules. In the same way that you do not limit yourself to being a back-end programmer or a front-end programmer, you do not limit yourself to saying, oh, Node.js is the solution to everything, right? Or Python is the solution to everything. Go is the solution to everything. It's not. Everything has its purpose. The only reason you would use something that's not meant for its purpose is just because you're not there yet. And I think it's absolutely fine to say, I know this probably isn't the best way to do this, but I sort of need to do it, or I will learn this later, or whatever, and have intermediate steps where you use Python for everything or something. Yeah, that's a data layer. That's Limba's architecture. That is my one lesson to you to take into your first job. Everybody is your user. Everybody is your consumer. Every sort of thing you code, think about it in a way as to sort of who is going to be using this code, what other ones of my team members are going to be interacting with this, how do I make their lives easier? And you'll do very well, I think. Coming out of a master's in information systems or computer science, I think at least, I know other sort of people around the state I've talked to, expect you to have context and background as to sure algorithms, how to program for sure, all that stuff. But they don't really expect you to be able to build an enormous system by yourself, right? That's the kind of stuff you'll get slack on. That's the kind of stuff people will teach you, allow you to learn on the job. Being insensitive, being inconsiderate with the way you code is not the kind of stuff that you'll get slack on in the job. If you're not fired, you will be yelled at. And that's pretty much it. Yeah, I think that's sort of the extent of my talk here today. If anybody has any remaining questions, I'm glad to take them.
We always get this question from our students, being one of their advisors. Should I go work for a startup or for Goldman Sachs?
Sure. Oh, that's a great question.
Right?
Yeah.
And, so I have my own ideas what each one means, but it would be nice to reflect yourself on your experience.
So should you go work for a startup or Goldman Sachs, a finance, a Google, an Amazon, or whatever? I love this question because it presupposes that there is an absolute answer, right? But it's really all about how you learn best. I am somebody that learns very well if you put me in the middle of a situation and ask me to figure it out, right? That's my sort of my sweet spot. I'll experiment, I'll build things, I'll break things, I'll tear them down, I'll build them again. And I will have learned a lot doing that. There are people that get very frustrated doing that, right? And it's not that they're bad programmers, it's not that they aren't proactive enough, it's just not their learning style, right? A lot of people excel if you give them a lot of structure, if you tell them, listen, we're building this. This is how we're building this. I need you to build this, right? If you do that enough, over enough years, you've eventually built enough cool stuff that you've learned very similar things to somebody who's in a startup, right? What is the correct answer for you, which path should you choose, is which one you feel you'll be learning faster in and you'll be frustrated less by, right? Because if you're so frustrated in a startup environment because there's sort of no structure that you can't even bring yourself to experiment, that you can't even bring yourself to learn on the job, you're not doing anything. You're sort of wasting your time. If you're so frustrated by somebody telling you what to do in terms of how to build a system, when you feel like you would know better, you feel like that's a stupid way of doing it, I want to try something else. If you're so frustrated by that on a constant basis, maybe you should try a startup. And I think you won't really know that until you work at both. You obviously can't work at both for your first job. So, take your best guess. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. I think we're done. Yeah, sure, sorry.
No, they haven't started yet. They sort of go through a warm-up.
Yeah, they warm up a little bit? All right, good. And so?
Coming to technology stack, you say that you use Flask. There are so many other, web development platforms available, and I have this debate with a lot of people. Why you choose Flask apart from, Bottle or something else? Like, what was your criteria to choose Flask instead of something else?
Sure. I'll give a little disclaimer in that architecture decision was decided before I came on board. But why would one choose Flask? I think is a good question. There's different levels of frameworks in terms of what they give you. Ruby on Rails gives you everything, right? It gives you, it gives you a background job processor, active job or whatever. It gives you a mailer, action mailer. You can send emails immediately. And it obviously gives you all the MVC stuff, the model view controller stuff for people that aren't that familiar with web architecture. A lot of times there's that trade-off, right? If you have all those things, you need to sort of pass through most of those things in order to hit any request. That makes things slow. Right? Flask is the other side of that coin. It's let's give you practically nothing, right? Let's give you practically nothing. Let's just give you the capability to create an MVC web application. And that'll make things fast. And it'll also allow you to shoot yourself in the foot if you make bad architecture decisions. Right? So pluses and minuses. The reason to use Flask for an API is because it's lightweight, because it's relatively fast compared to other frameworks. So if you're going to be putting it at the center of your application, right, where every single request is going to pass through and every single response is going to pass through, you want that thing to be fast. A lot of people also tend to lately favor Go for that layer, the API layer, because it is a step slower than C, it is just as minimalist, and it is really fast, right? So it's really all about kind of your goal, your intention.
So Ruby on Rails gives you, we can interact with database directly using Ruby on Rails.
Okay.
So why this is the second layer for Python? Because
Yeah.
Ruby on Rails allows us to directly interact with Postgres, SQL, directly we can migrate data.
Yeah.
So what is the layer of that, the middle layer?
Sure. So Ruby on Rails is famous for being a really opinionated framework, right? That means that in order to use it, you have to subscribe to the idea of third normalized form on all database tables. You have to subscribe to the idea that every single database table should have a model that wraps around it, right? And as such, you have to believe that having sort of data constantly fed into a class code that creates an instance, and then you use that instance, and then that instance is persisted, that all won't slow down your site enough to use it, basically, right? So not everybody wants to subscribe to that idea. For us, it proves useful in certain situations when we need things that you could do on an instance, right? I'm trying to think of an example. A loan application. A loan application is, there is a general idea, the platonic ideal of a loan application that requires education, work history, whatever. And then there is my loan application. Where did I go to school? Where did I work before Lendbuzz or whatever? All that stuff is object-oriented stuff. It's instance-based stuff. It makes sense to wrap that in instance stuff and object-oriented stuff. But something like one of the things we're working on right now, it's connecting bank transactions, connecting people's bank accounts. We're just wrapping a third-party provider, right? A third-party provider that gives us an API, that gives us URLs that we're supposed to consume. There's no reason to use instance stuff there, right? We build a model that serves as a wrapper around all those URLs, and then we call that model directly, like, I don't know, like a static class, like an abstract class, like any of a variety of things like that. For us, having a data layer and API on top of something minimalist like Flask allowed us in the early stages, and this is very common for startups, to keep our data schema really flexible. Right? The vast majority of Lendbuzz sprung up out of JSON data initially, and as we've grown and matured, it's been moved from JSON data into more relational data because it's all fixed now, right? Like we know what it's going to look like. If we had started with Rails right off the bat like that, everything would be relational to begin with. Every single change that we needed to do would have to go through migrations, drop these columns, add these other columns. It ends up being a lot of overhead.
Practices that you have that make sure that your database state it never goes down, or do you use Docker or some other DevOps practices? Or
sure. I think the best answer to that is Lendbuzz does go down. Like it does, that happens. I think, especially around the time that tech startups became sexy, there was this huge thing about zero downtime, right? That's the thing you want to achieve as a startup, as a business. Zero downtime, your servers are never down. Maybe for something like an ad tech business, that's really important. people, your money is in volume, your money is in eyeballs. For something like LendBuzz, where we always have active users, but we don't always have 1,000 active users, right? There are sometimes 2 a.m. in the morning where there will be 5 people on the site. It doesn't matter as much. We still don't want to inconvenience our users, obviously, but we put a lot less stock on kind of sophisticated operations than really on speed of development. Right? That said, if you want zero downtime, that is a sort of long talk about redundant architecture, scalable and redundant architecture. The reason that they call us software engineers, right, and they don't call us programmers, because we don't just create, we have to think about these things. We have to think about redundancy, and we have to think about availability, and we have to think about all those things. For something like that, databases practically never go down. It's really hard to bring something down like Postgres, like really hard. Web applications go down more frequently, and those go down because of user error. There's code. Those go down because of hardware error. A machine fails. On Amazon Web Services, a rack just failed, and you need to spin up a new instance, put all the code on there, whatever. Happened to us. Different solutions for different problems. I would say user error, up your development team processes, more tests, continuous integration, automatic deploy processes. Don't SSH into a server and do git pull, right? That is error prone. That will cause problems. npm install, whatever. Have a script that you run. Hardware level stuff, redundancy, right? So you have the code running on one server, get it running on a different server, and have the architecture of the application be set up so that a request can hit any server that you would like, and everything still works. So there's a long answer, but that's a short one. Yeah.
Where are you on cybersecurity, and what are you doing with these attacks?
So we did a bunch of stuff early on. So initially, all of lembuzz.com was client-side encrypted. Right? That means that even if a hacker downloaded our whole database and they opened it up, they couldn't read a thing, because everything was encrypted in such a way that when the server started up, you had to input a password, and that password was used to encrypt every single piece of data. Right? Pluses and minuses. Client-side encryption across everything made things very slow, because in order to read anything, you have to pull it, you have to unencrypt it, you have to sort of write to it, or read it, write to it, and then re-encrypt it, and then send it back. Right? For us, we've kind of scaled that back a bit, unencrypted everything, and mostly right now I think just sensitive financial information is being encrypted, like transactions, bank transactions, for example. That's one thing. Another thing is a lot of SaaS sort of providers have pretty good tools now. So Amazon has something called Guard Duty that will analyze all your traffic coming in and out of your website, and will tell you, oh, you were attacked by China 7 times today, right? Which it tells us that frequently. But as long as you have sort of good protections. One other thing that we do, which is huge for us, that central layer, you can't touch it from anywhere aside from those 2 nodes. Right? So anything that reads and writes to the database, you can't touch it without an SSL handshake, SSL connection to it, and those certificates only exist on 2 other servers in our system, and the IP addresses are blocked, so you can only reach those even after you have the SSL cert by spoofing IP addresses. Like, it's several layers. One thing about cybersecurity that a lot of people don't know, it's impossible to prevent hackers, right? It's impossible to like completely 100% defeat them. Your goal in cybersecurity is to make it such a pain in the ass for them to get into your server that they just stop trying, right? So there's several layers. You'll have your hardware layer, your software layer, your code layer, your certificate layer, sort of everything. Yeah. All right.
You jump. I'm trying to think of a couple of situations, job interviews. Have you come across 2 scenarios of a highly expected candidate that was a disappointment? And
Sure.
the reason why,
Yeah.
and a low expectation that became wow, a nice surprise.
Yeah.
Why?
Yes.
The catchy things in engineers. You know, you've got engineers, right? They're coming to the real world, and they're trying different things. They're not coming with everyone is telling them how they should behave or how to, so it's very confusing. But there are usually fundamental intuitive ideas about seeing something in a person.
Yeah, okay,
You know.
great. That's a good question. That's a really good question. What are some examples of really bad interviews that should have gone well, and really good interviews that should have gone poorly. I think the first one has a lot more examples than the second one. The first one, the one I see the most often, sort of how you present yourself is completely orthogonal to how good you are as a developer, right? Well, I wouldn't say completely, but largely so. That means our phone screen, right? We ask about the technologies you've used, the projects that you've been a part of. If you're not careful, you can ask questions as an interviewer and have your candidate respond with things that sound like details about the project, right? Things that sound pretty in-depth, and it sounds like they sort of had a large part in that project, and they know a lot about the technologies that were used. And when they show up for the interview, which is a completely technical interview, excuse me, it's a really different situation, right? It's not tell me about some stuff that you've done. It's not tell me about a project that you've been involved in. It is literally solve this problem, right? It's just like very different things. People can think about a problem intelligently, frequently, and have at the same time a hard time solving it, right? And I think that more so speaks not to a lack of preparedness, not to a lack of prepping for your interview. It speaks a little bit to kind of deceiving yourself in terms of your level of knowledge about a subject, about a topic. In that you believe that if you've done something in your life, then you are capable to do it again, or do more of it, or that you're good at that, or something. I would try, so I would push you, I would encourage you to try really hard to quantify your ability in that sort of situation, right? So going back to the reverse a list problem, can you do that in 10 seconds? You know, it's not a difficult problem, but it can be difficult to sit there in front of a whiteboard or stand there in front of a whiteboard in front of an interviewer and have it at the top of your head and think about it logically and correctly, right? Whether it's nerves, anxiety, whatever the reason that you didn't perform that day, that's quantifiable. You know, you should know if you're going to perform on a specific type of problem or not. And it's really about sitting down and trying a variety of problems and timing yourself on them in a situation where you don't have a computer, you're on a board, you have a piece of paper, and seeing if you do as well as you think you should. That's a bad indicator. As well as you think, as other people think you should be doing on it, right? That's a pretty big one, I think. One thing I also tell candidates that sort of come through LendBuzz, which is huge because I think people don't really hear it enough, there is such a thing called language fluency, right? There is such a thing as programming fluency. A lot of people put on their resumes, oh, I know PHP, Python, Node.js, Ruby, Java, C, C++, right? Do you know all of those languages fluently? What that means is if I ask you something idiomatic about a language, let's say you have a list or an array of integers, and I would like you to return a list or array of the squares of those integers to me, right? Can you do that on a board without Googling anything? That is language fluency. It is that you understand the idioms of a language, you understand the constructs that are specific to that language. Ruby has built-in iterators to every single data structure. It has each, it has map, it has select, it has collect, it has all these things, right? Python doesn't have those. Python has language-level functional programming iterators, right? That means they have a top-level map. They have top-level lambdas that you can use in a variety of ways. Those are all things that you would only know if you're fluent in a language, right? The difference between writing to the terminal in something like C versus writing to the terminal in something like C++. Right? If you are doing a C++ programming interview and you are writing C, then you're not doing well. Right? You're not fluent in that language. You've put it on your resume, you believe that you know it, but you do not know it. And that comes out in those problems that ask you not about surface level things, but ask you about depth. I'm trying to think of a good example from one of our interviews. Okay, a lot of people say they know Linux, right? Because they've had to FTP some files to a Linux server at some point in their academic careers, right? The question, and I will change my interview after this, so don't worry. The question that we ask about Linux at Lembas is, we have a folder of 10,000, 100,000 HTML files. These are all business pages, right? Pretend we are an agency. These are all business pages that have been custom developed by however many developers to talk about the name of the business, the description of the business, pictures, what have you. Inside each of these pages, there's phone numbers. There is a phone number, the contact number for each of these businesses. We don't care about any of that other data. We just want those phone numbers, right? How do you do that? If you're fluent in Linux, if you know Linux, you can do that in 30 seconds, right? You can say, oh, there is a Linux utility called grep. I could just grep for all these phone numbers. Or, I don't know how to do that, but I can cat a file into a sed or an awk expression to pull out those phone numbers very quickly, right? If I ask you that question, you struggle a little bit, that's fine. If I ask you that question and say, try thinking about some Linux utilities that could help you here, and you still struggle, you don't know Linux, right? It's not something you put on your resume. You can't, it's not about FTPing things to a server, it's not about SSHing things to a server, it's about knowing your tools. So that's the first example. Yeah. The first example of like people that say they know things and come in, and it's not their fault for sure. It's just they've never really been put in a situation where the standard for how you're supposed to know things is a little bit higher, right? And that's industry. That's what industry sort of forces upon you. The other one, I think, is a better question. How do you not sort of present well, but then crush it in a technical interview, right? That's a really good one. My suggestion for that is passion. So a lot of people, especially people that are more drawn to engineering disciplines, are a little bit more soft-spoken, a little bit more in their heads, right? They care about, it's true, they care about building. They care about sort of putting things together, understanding how things work. Doesn't necessarily mean they care about communicating effectively. It doesn't necessarily mean they care about communicating warmly. And you know that's can be a disadvantage, but it's also not always relevant. When you are like that, and you know and you acknowledge that you're like that, and it's not something you necessarily want to change, it's like, that's just how you are. The way you can shine in a phone screen, the way you can shine before the technical interview, to be given that opportunity for the technical interview because you know you'll crush it, is really passion, right? It's really like, if they ask you a question about this academic project that you did in your master's, it's not like, oh yeah, we built, I'll use this example because I built this previously. We built like a Craigslist clone. And people could put things on it and other people could buy things from it, right? If I ask you, all right, tell me about this Craigslist clone, and sort of your response is, yeah, so we had a form where people submitted the item, and then we had a list where people viewed the item, right? It's sort of this cursory kind of superficial, this is what we did. That shows no passion, right? That shows nothing that would interest me as an interviewer. Because I know that the best programmers, the best developers are people that care a lot about their craft, that are obsessed, right? They're obsessed with the appropriate way to build things, right? Now, if I ask you that same question and you say something like, oh, it was awesome. Like, it was so cool. Because the first time that I had built something that connected to people through a central location, right? Before, oh, I had made like to-do lists or whatever where one person was using it, or I had made whatever, little apps, little UIs or whatever, but it was the first time I had to think about how you needed a CRUD layer to create all this stuff and also to show all this stuff to two completely different people, right? And you talk about how you made that better. You were like, you know, at first I just wrote the CRUD and it was creation and it was showing and it was cool and it made sense and it was effective. But I started using it and it was such a crappy experience. You know, it was like so boring. Like I couldn't imagine anybody using this but myself. So I added a little bit of Ajax in there. And now you can create things and it'll show up for people in real time, right? Those little details, those user experience things, those things that that people that don't really care about what they're doing won't do because they don't care about what they're doing. Those will allow you to get to a technical interview even though you don't present well, even though your resume is a little spotty, even though sort of your professional appearance isn't always 100% put together. If I see that you care, if I see that you care to such an extent that you paid attention to details that very few other people would pay attention to, you're getting a technical interview. Yeah. Yeah.
How is the land bus culture, and do you have any co-op right now?
Any co-op right now? Okay, that's a good question.
Co-op working for you and also co-op.
Oh, okay. Leading question, I see. Yeah, Lemba's culture is at a really cool place right now because, as I showed you in the presentation previously, it was all build, right? It doesn't matter if it's if it's barely working. It doesn't matter if it's like lacks polish. If sort of the way people are like the developer level processes aren't there. What matters is that we can prove that we can make money, right? We're in a different state now. We proved that we can make money. We're making money. We proved it sort of internally, obviously, and also to investors, right? With seed level, Series A, Series B. People that give us money are now surprised because we are crushing all our benchmarks, right? We're just doing very well. When you get to that sort of stage, you get the privilege to step back a little bit and implement standards. Implement standards, implement processes, implement all those things. So for us, it's gone from, these are all the things that we need to do this week, let's do them, to sitting down Monday as a team and talking about the different features that exist that we could possibly implement, right? One of them is asset value for a collateral for a car pulled from Carfax, right? One of them is we're getting a bunch of errors from this system, so maintenance. When you can do refactoring of something that exists, you know you're in a good place because you can't always fix the stuff that you created broken, right? Refactoring of the connection to bank account transaction stuff. That's sort of the state where we're at right now. We sit down on a Monday, we choose our priorities. Everybody sort of understands what is important on a company level. Even if they don't, we sort of talk about that at that meeting. So by the end of that meeting, you're supposed to sort of understand. And then you get to choose. We believe very much in two things: sense of urgency on one end, and two, committing to pretty close to the amount of work that you think you'll be able to complete, you can handle. So you have a lot of say in terms of how much you think you can get done this week. If you say like one thing, you're going to get pushback from some member of the team. What I like about our culture is it isn't our boss, right? The co-founder, CTO, it's always like, come on, you can do more than that. It's really like, we know what we're capable of, right? So if someone's like, I don't know, I think just maybe one or two things, which never happens with us, honestly. Somebody else like myself or Pranjal or Abhinay will be like, you sure? You sure? You could probably do a little bit more. Or vice versa, right? Pranjal often tells me I overcommit on my weeks. So it'll be like, I commit to 15 things or 14 things. And he's like, are you sure? And then we bring it down, right? And that's, for me, that is the ideal working environment because there's both levels, right? There is the urgency, the idea that we need to get things done because we're a business, we're trying to create something that will produce more jobs, that will give more livelihood to people and give more money to people that need it. And there's the other side of it. If it's too much, take some stuff off. You know, just like do what you need to do. Do what you think you can do. There's that. In terms of working hours and sort of company culture, we get in a little bit later than the rest of the company. The sort of entry time is 10 a.m. Nobody really yells at you if you come in after 10 a.m., but you are expected to get the work done, right? So if you come in at 1 p.m., which I'm guilty of probably far too often, you'll be staying till 10 p.m. not because, oh, you need to put your hours in, but because you won't get the work done. There is enough to do for everybody, and it's enough interesting work that ends up happening. Whether you commit to the hours or not, if you commit to the work, the hours will be there. Something like a specific question about culture, because I'm in the middle of it, I always forget what people care about. No?
Do you have a mentor program?
Not especially, no. We're small enough. We're small enough that I am working one-on-one constantly with everybody. My boss as well as sort of the two other people on our team.
So my approach in managing my people I work with is that, okay, if you're going to want to do 9 to 5, then I expect you to be available on weekends. I expect you to be available at night. And it's either a flexible time or you can stick to the standard.
Sure. Yeah, we don't do too much. We have flexible time during weekdays. Not expected to work weekends. Primarily because we are also in a very privileged position. I'll tell you guys that also. At a lot of tech startups, because the results of your production is what's going to make or break the business, there's a lot more pressure on you, right? So if you are not available during a weekend and the site goes down, and we're an ad tech startup that cares about the eyeballs and it kills our sort of brand image as Facebook, you'll have a lot of pressure to work on weekends. We don't have that pressure because our business is money, right? We give money and we get more back. Everything tech does is creating better ways for people to move through the application, is creating sort of less friction for our internal team. And as a result, there's very few things that are like immediately urgent for us. It's always, what's an example? Right now we're refactoring something so that we get less emails to the tech team because we're obviously scaling up. We're going to receive more emails and they're not all serviceable, right? We care about sort of our capacity to work in the future, our workload in the future. It's that kind of stuff. In a lot of other startups and a lot of other companies even, you won't have that luxury to work on maintenance so much, to work on refactoring so much, to sort of take care of your health, so to speak. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks.
I appreciate the time. Very insightful.
Thank you.